Much, Katie. Happy to be here. Let me get my camera started. There we go. All right, happy to be here. As Katie said, I support the XSOAR product here at Palo Alto Networks, and I've been with the company just over 3 years. And today I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of some use cases that I've actually set up because I've found these are really common scenarios that are found in most security operation centers. And as Katie said, I've got a very diverse background. I spent time doing network administration, network engineering, sysadmin, just about everything you can imagine because that's what they have you do in the Army. But anyway, I don't have slides for you today because I'm not a huge fan of slides and I'm not very good at making them. So I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. All right. So you should be able to see my screen now. And I'm going to walk you through a handful of use cases here. One of the things that I've seen that's common across most security operations teams is there's just too much noise. You've got alerts coming from every possible tool you can imagine. And there's just no way to look at them. So if there's things that that you're taking on every day, you're responding to phishing events, you're responding to malware alerts from an endpoint. How do you take all those tasks that you're going to do anyway at the start of every incident and automate those? This isn't intended to be an XSOAR sales pitch, but that's the product I'm using right now because it's the one I support. So I'm going to walk you through a few ways to help automate some of the more mundane things you do. Just as an example, one use case I did for a customer was looking up IP addresses on a spreadsheet. I came from an organization back when I was in uniform where we had 8 or 9 different IP address tracking spreadsheets. Even though there's automated tools out there to do that, that's how we did it. So you can imagine looking those up back and forth takes a lot of time. And that's really what I want to show you is how to save some of that time here. So the first use case I'm going to work through, I've got a virtual machine stood up here. I've got a couple of them actually. Let me get logged back into this one. And I've got some sample pieces of malware. They don't do anything. They're just designed to trigger malware alerts. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to execute that file. Let me move this out of the way. And it's going to trigger an event on my endpoint detection response to our Cortex XDR, which is also another product that we offer here at Palo, but it's the one I've got loaded. And I'm going to show you the alert get pulled into XDR, and then I'm going to show you XSOAR ingesting that and then taking some prescribed actions. So I've already got a demo playbook developed. And so it's going to do a handful of things for us. It's going to start out by creating a Jira issue. It's going to create a ServiceNow ticket. I did both just because, those are the 2 most common ones I see out there. Not saying that that's all of them, but there's a number of other tools. These are just the ones I see the most. It's going to go through, it's going to pull information about the user from Active Directory. In this case, I have it pulling in information about the user's manager, what department they're in, and their job title. So we can use that as a decision maker for gathering further information or taking further action. It's going to then attempt to retrieve a copy of the malicious file from the endpoint. And then it's going to go through and it's going to enrich that file. It's going to pull information about it from VirusTotal. Has this been seen before? If so, how many different antivirus, anti-malware engines out there are reporting this as malicious? And if it meets our threshold or my threshold, what I've defined as malicious, in this case, it's going to be at least 10 of those AV engines reported as malicious, then it's going to go into remediation. Otherwise, it's just going to go through and we're going to have to do manual tasks to do, or it's going to mark it as a false positive and it's not going to respond to it. But as you can see, I've got actions defined in here, such as resetting the user's AD password. What it's going to do is it's going to then generate a new password, which I would store in the incident here, and I can send that off to a service desk. I can send that off to the user's manager, letting them know, hey, this user's account's been locked out. Here's their new password. They need to contact the service desk to get it unlocked. And then I'll also show you how I can manipulate this and take additional steps based on the information that's returned from these tools. So the entire idea behind this is we buy all these tools out there in cybersecurity land, and we spend $10,000 to $100,000 on them. Then we use 10 to 15% of the capability. I saw it all the time in the military. We had niche products that did one thing really well, but then we neglected the other 80% of what it could do. The idea here is to leverage the APIs that are exposed on these tools to make you get better utilization out of them. Expose functionality that you might have been overlooking. So with that, I've got this defined here. I'm going to go over to my incidents page because that's where we're going to see this pop up. I'm going to go into my virtual machine, and I'm just going to launch one of these. And I'll get an alert. It'll say XDR has blocked this because it's a suspicious executable. Now, because this has a built-in reporting time, I'm going to go ahead and just do a check-in just to force it to report that back to XDR's web console. And in just a second here, I should have another new alert from the two that I had. Give it a second. Oh no, that one, that's actually it. I refreshed too quickly. So if I click on the alerts here, wait for that to load. And I can take a look at what it detected. In this case, it should have detected, I think it was NetSky I clicked on. Or NewStar Infect. Yep, that was the one. So this incident, I've now got XSOAR configured to pull this in every minute. So if I go over here, I can check to make sure it's pulling. You should see a new incident coming in here in just a second. And what that's going to do is it's tied to a playbook that's going to take that automated series of actions that I just showed you in the the quick playbook walkthrough. Just make sure here. Oh, let me change. I just saw the note about the dark theme. And I'll change that over here and let me know if that makes things a little bit easier to read. That looks better. All right, so I'm going to go in here and just reset this so it actually pulls the last event because it doesn't look like it's going to cooperate with me. As Murphy tends to do, he shows his head every time. So while we're waiting on that, I'm just going to go ahead and pop over to the next demo so I'm not just leaving us hanging. Once that alert comes back, I'll walk you through what it's going to do, and I'll show you how we can extend the functionality to automate some of that routine information gathering that your analysts are doing. The same thing that you're doing every time an incident pops. If I was as a network engineer, if a switch port goes down, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log into the switch. I'm going to do a show IP interface brief. I'm going to do a show run possibly. I might do a few other commands. Well, if you're already going to do those, let's let the technology do it for you. I mean, automate what can be automated and then use that to make informed decisions to take action. And actually, it looks like it just pulled one in. So there we go. So we can see this is the one I'm looking at. This is the latest alert that just came in from our XDR tool. And I can walk it through the work plan. So I'm going to tie it to the XDR demo response playbook that I've developed. And I'm going to let it go ahead and run. So you can see it's going pretty quickly for most of this. The file retrieval is usually the longest task, but it's created a ServiceNow ticket. It's created a Jira ticket. It's gotten information about the impacted user from Active Directory. If I go back over to my ServiceNow instance, give that a refresh, we can see malware automated remediation on host client 02. Same thing in Jira. There's the alert. And now the good thing about these integrations, we can also pass information back and forth. So if you get an alert that's automatically created, say, by your SIM, and it's ingested into Jira or ServiceNow, you can use that as a trigger point for some of these automations. And so while this is going through, I'm going to show you the context that this automation platform pulls back for you. So like I said, it pulls back information about the user themselves, the manager. A little shout out to the movie Idiocracy, if anybody's seen it, Manager Supreme. And actually, it looks like it's at a decision point for us. So it's determined the file does meet the malicious criteria, because I can look here at the information it's gathered from VirusTotal, and I can see the analysis produced 39 positive hits on that malware. Now, again, that piece of malware doesn't really do anything. It's just there as a sample. But in this case, it's going to ask, okay, do you want to reset the AD user's password? This can be sent via email, via Slack, via Teams, what have you. In this case, I'm just responding right here in the tool, but the idea is to take those proactive steps that are going to be taken anyway and pass the information after we've gathered the necessary contextual data behind it to your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 help desk. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and click yes. I want to reset the user's password. It's going to do a check based on the analyst's response. And as you can see over here on the right, it's generated a new password. Now, again, let's say I wanted to do something like send that to the user's manager. I could do that as well. I can, if I look at the demo playbook here, move my little screen out of the window or out of the way. And let's say, okay, I don't want to do just that. Let's say I want to isolate that endpoint so it can't talk out. Oh, that's the wrong hand. There we go, endpoint isolate. I had it backwards. So I can take that, and all this information is it's just you just have to fill it in. And now it's already gathered as part of the incident when it's created. So when I ingest this information from XDR, from a firewall, or from whatever security tool this integrates with, it provides a certain set of contextual data that I can use. So in this case, I want the endpoint ID. So I've already created a way to map that. So I'm going to take the endpoint ID, coming back, that's mapped to the endpoint field within XSOAR. And then I can hit OK, and that isolate task is now here and will be part of the playbook for future incidents. And then likewise, as you saw, I did a conditional check here. Did we respond to the question yes or no? If we responded yes, we want to go into the remediate section. If we responded no, then we're going to do some sort of manual actions. And then you can do the same thing once you gather more information. So let's say we submit this file to a sandbox and it comes back as malicious, whereas VirusTotal or some other virus search engine reported this as benign. You could use that as a decision point to send an alert to an analyst saying, these open source information platforms that we use said this was a benign finding. However, our internal sandbox says it's malicious. What do you want to do? Do you want to go into remediation? So again, alleviating a lot of those manual steps that need to be taken. Let me see. I see something in Q&A. So is there an is this a plugin for the firewall? So that's a good question. And that's actually one of the use cases I wanted to walk through as well. So in this case, I'm just going to close this because I don't want to save these changes, but you can see some of the actions that are in the realm of the possible. No longer does your service desk have to go in there, launch the Active Directory users and computers, reset the password, notify the user. We can do that automatically. Again, leveraging technology for what it's really meant for. Let's automate what we can automate and keep humans in the loop where it's needed. So since the question was asked about firewalls, I will go ahead and jump to that use case. So let's say you want to do some sort of firewall rule maintenance. I didn't develop a playbook for this one, but I can demo it pretty easily. If I go over to the settings here, I've got an integration tied into a demo firewall that I've got running in a virtual machine here. Now, this is just one of our Palo Strata firewalls. There we go. But this is already configured. So let's say I wanted to get a list of rules. So think about this in the terms of approvals for changes to ports and protocols that are allowed through the firewall going inbound or outbound, or approved hosts that are authorized to go to certain sites that might not be permitted for the rest of the organization. you can leverage that through your ticketing system, pull that information in, and once an approval has been granted, automatically apply that update to the rule. So in this case, let's say I want to get a list of rules because I'm not sure which one it would go in. I can just do a list rules. Yes, I'll execute that in a playground. And as you can see, it says I've got, test rule 1, test rule 2, test rule 3. Now I can take that information and I can edit it. I can add applications to it. I can allow or deny certain source or destination addresses. It really makes change management a lot easier by being able to take these workflows that might already be developed in those ITSM platforms and then further automate that to where you can go through and add these changes to, let's say, an external dynamic list. If you're familiar with our firewalls, we can add that to an EDL that XSOAR can then host and send out to the firewall on its next polling cycle. There wouldn't be a commit necessary. The firewall would just automatically ingest that based on a tag that's applied through the SOAR platform. Likewise, you can do stuff like creating tags and objects. So if I wanted to tag a certain address object a certain way, that would automatically be applied dynamically based on how you have your tag policies applied in the firewall. There's a number of different things you can do here. So at this point, I'm just going to pause really quick. Are there any questions or anything that you want to see from these two? Because if not, I've got 3 more that I can walk through. All right, not seeing anything in the chat, so feel free to keep sending them. I'm going to jump back to another use case that's near and dear to my heart because I've seen it bite a number of organizations before, and that comes down to managing SSL certificates. I'm sure many of you can probably relate to an SSL certificate that you've issued to a web server, an appliance, some sort of device that's serving something in the organization, and then you go and you forget about it. Well, when that certificate expires, you don't know about it until the users start to complain. Well, let's look at a way to automate checking those certificates and then alerting the appropriate party when those certificates are about to expire. So in this case, I'm going to go over to my list. I've got a list of certificates that I want to check. Number of different domain names, IP addresses, and I want to get the status of these on a periodic basis. And if once the status is gained, I can then generate a report that is sent out to whoever's responsible for that system. Now that could be added to this list. You could add in a responsible party as part of the CSV file. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create that new incident. I'm just going to call it SSL demo. And I'm going to go ahead and create it. So that is there. And what it's going to do is it's going to walk through the same type of playbook functionality I showed you before. It's going to go through and it's going to check the certificate status for each of those domains or IP addresses in that list. It's going to parse the output. This went really quickly this time because I'd already run it earlier this morning to cut down on time spent just staring at a screen waiting for things to refresh. But it parses the output. It adds it to a custom layout that I built. So I can say certificates that are expired, certificates that are in a warning status. So they're going to expire in less than 180 days. I have an expiring status. So this is anything less than 90 days, or then certificates that are good for anything over 180. What's happened now, though, as part of this work plan, not only did it populate that layout, it sent an email to me, let me know the status of those certificates. So if I go over here, it should have come in. There it is. So you can see, you get this nicely formatted list of what your current SSL certificate status is for all these different domains, IP addresses, what have you, whatever appliance you want to point the workflow towards. And you can take that one step further. I've also added in a command. So let's say I wanted to generate a certificate signing request. I could take the CN from the existing certificate that was returned to me, and I could just say, just for demo purpose, I'm going to say google.com, and I can specify the rest of the fields for the CSR. Now, I want to output this to what we call our war room. This is everything that happens within an incident is tracked in the war room. So I'm going to say true. And what we'll get is not only the CSR file that we can download and then upload to a CA for approval, you get the base 64 encoded version of the CSR file. So now then you can take this one step further and then automate submitting that to the web enrollment feature for Active Directory as an example, or whatever other certificate authority service that you're running if it supports some sort of API-based calling. So again, no longer do you have to worry about these certificates expiring and nobody tracking them, as long as there's some way to keep that list up to date. So let's say you have a new server provisioning ticket flow in your ITSM system. You could take the output of that server provisioning system or that server provisioning ticket and add it to that list if necessary. So if it relies on an SSL certificate, it could add that IP or the FQDN to that list, and then it'll continue to periodically check it. Again, this is one that I've seen during my time at DISA and the Army. I saw this one bite both the Army and the Marine Corps a couple of times. But on that, I've got two more demos here for you. The first one I've got is, I'm going to actually hop over to a different platform. It's automated indicator ingestion. So let's say you get lists of indicators that might not come in via a normal method, like a Styx taxi feed or some other automated feed-based distribution system. Let's say you're just getting, in this case, a PDF file that this one just happens to be in the old OpenIOC format. And now you have to go through and you have to look at each of these indicators and figure out which ones are relevant. And you have to pick out all these, the IP addresses, domain names, and so on. What I've done is I have a workflow, and this one's actually already triggered. That will go through, and I'll just walk you through the process on the playbook first. So in this case, it's listening to an email box. So I've got different organizations sending different indicators of compromise to me to a certain email address. It's going to check that email box and it's going to say, okay, every time an email comes in, run it through this workflow. It's going to check and say, is there a file? If so, what type of file do we have? Is it plain text? Is it PDF? So on, Word doc. It's going to extract the contents of that file. And then it's going to attempt to extract any indicators it can find. In the case of a PDF file, it's also going to rasterize an image of what that file looks like. So that way it can be displayed in the incident information page. This is also useful functionality. So let's talk phishing as an example. If you were to put that rasterization function into a phishing playbook, you could say, rasterize what the target web page is that was found in the reported phishing email, or rasterize a copy of what the email that was sent to your end user looks like. So that way it's there for the analyst to see, and everything's been defanged, so nothing's clickable. It's literally just an image of that target page or target file, target email, what have you. Likewise, it can do optical character recognition. And if it says, was there text extracted, it would look at that text and then extract any URLs or other IOCs that might have come out of the OCR data. And as a last step, what it's going to do is, I made a very simple regex check. There's a number of different ways that threat actors are identified. In this case, I'm just looking at APT followed by an white space that's optional and 2 digits, APT 17, APT 24, what have you. And I want to prompt the analyst then to select the indicators that are relevant and tag those in the system as being related to that threat actor. The idea here is you can then serve that data based on tag up in a variety of formats for other tools to ingest. So let's say you wanted a firewall to ingest it. I could generate a feed based off that tag that would then be able to be sent to your firewall, to an IPS, to a web proxy, and so on. But either way, I'm going to go back over to my incidents page. And I'm just going to show you this. a second. So it's at a pause, and I put that pause in there on purpose just so it doesn't automatically run through. Now this one should run a lot quicker because I've already done all the extraction ahead of time. But as you can see, it lets you follow along with each step of the process. All the outputs are produced here in the war room. So you can see the indicators that it's extracted. And each time a new step is taken, that's all output here. So again, the idea being to take this data and automatically implement it on your different security tools based on, data coming from a trusted source. Like you want to verify, okay, we're going to process this email coming into the inbox, but I want to verify that it's coming from like a US Cyber Command, NSA, FBI, or whatever other threat source you might have that you're sharing data back and forth with. And being able to put that into action as rapidly as possible. Now, again, that all comes back to trustworthiness. How much do you trust the source that you're getting the information from? And that's where you add the checks and balances in, because one of the things I always see when you start talking automation is there's a fear of the term automation. The goal here is to make this as automated or as manual as you're comfortable with. So in this case, you can see it identified the threat actor, and it sent me an email saying prompt the user for which indicators to associate with the threat actor. This is important because if you look at this OpenIOC file, we've got URLs such as apache.org. You've got stuff, let me see, FireEye.com, not necessarily malicious, but it's in there and it's considered an indicator because it's a URL, or it might be an IP address or some sort of file hash. But I've got a link here to click. And now, once this loads, I can select the indicators that are relevant to that threat actor. So again, this provides that human verification before the automated process completes. In this case, I'm not concerned with any of these domains because they're all associated with FireEye or w3.org. But I am concerned about the IP addresses and the file hashes because those are the actual indicators. I can submit that back to the system. It gets the response. And it says, okay, you tagged IPs and files. And it goes through and it applies that tag to those indicators of compromise. So I can then go in here and say actor APT17. And here's all the indicators that it just extracted. And again, the idea would be I could serve this up via a taxi feed. I can send it, via email. Hey, these were the extracted indicators. Do you want to implement these for blocking actions and so on? So you can see the flexibility that's present here when it comes to automation and tying together tools that might not necessarily talk to each other natively. That was one of the problems I ran into again in Uniform was we had 18 different tools. So swivel chair was a real problem, having to bounce between different administrative consoles. And being able to pull information on a centralized platform just makes it a lot easier. I don't have to bounce between the SIM, the IPS, the firewall, or in some cases, even routers and switches if I wanted to get ACL information. And with that, I'm going to again pause one more time to see if there are any questions before I go on to the next use case. All right. Nothing heard. And this last one's really straightforward. It ties back into my history as a network engineer. One of the first things I saw when I started working on the platform was, well, I would always have to log into these routers and switches and pull information. So there's an integration we had, NetMiko, based off the Python library. I've got it tied into a switch. Actually, this is on the other system, forgive me. So I've got our Cisco router. So let's say I wanted to go ahead and just do something simple. I wanted to pull back what the current interface status is on that router. You would normally just have to SSH in, but I can just let the system do that for me. And we get that information. And now this is all stored, again, in the incident context, so I can take action based on any piece of this information that's returned. In this case, I know modern versions of iOS allow you to do or output the command results in JSON. This is an older version, just running here in my home lab, but you could easily parse this data out and then use that to make decisions. If the example I like to give is, let's say port security tripped. You could make that one of the commands that's run by default each time one of those interface down messages comes across. And you could prompt saying, hey, user, or this port tripped via port security. Here's the number of MACs in the MAC address table. Do you want to clear the MAC history and reactivate the port? And if not, you could put it into a manual resolution status where somebody has to go out there and verify. Because let's say this is a high profile user, an executive, a senior leader, and there shouldn't be systems plugging into that port other than that user's. Well, that might require a little bit more investigation. So again, given the human the opportunity to make the decision based off information that the computer's gone out there and just gathered for you. So no longer do you have to carry out that maintenance laptop, unless of course that device you're trying to get into is down. That's a completely different story, but just some of the things in the realm of the possible. And with that, those are the 5 use cases that I wanted to show, just simple things to think about as you start looking into automation and orchestration. I always see, we like to show off our phishing playbook when we go into demos with customers. Personally, I think it's a bit overwhelming, but it does show just how complex you can get. So, I mean, the number of things that you can do here, I mean, this, I think, looks intimidating. Let me zoom out here. I mean, seeing all the individual tasks, what they are labeled, not necessarily important, but you can see this can make somebody look at it and just, go cross-eyed as I did the first time I saw it. So my advice really here is start thinking about those things that are simple, that are eating up all of your time. If you've got an alert that's coming in from a SIM that you're responding to the same way each time, why not figure out a way to automate that and then use humans to make the decision where it's needed? We always talk about how cybersecurity, the field is so understaffed. Well, let's leverage the technology to do what it's designed to do and let our analysts focus on what's important. So instead of trying to, start from scratch and build or do this entire playbook right after you get a brand new automation tool, start with the simple tasks. Let's go query the inbox, the phishing inbox, and generate a rasterization of that image. Actually, I don't think I showed that to you in the last one, but if I go back over to this incident page, and sorry, this is a different system, that's why it's still in dark mode. If I go back in here and I look at the incident info page, I talked about rasterizing. So here's the information on the file that was received that we extracted indicators from, and then here's a copy of what the file contents look like. So again, the analyst doesn't have to go in there and click into what's potentially a malicious file. XSOAR is going to go capture that. It's not going to let anything execute. It's done in a sandboxed environment, but you can get a better picture of what's happening. So think about that as a phishing email or the target URL that's being used to phish your users and other things like that. And then adding simple tasks. So let's say you don't want to automatically go in there and delete emails. You could add that as a button here for your analyst to click. Though once I've reviewed all this, I've confirmed it's malicious, I can click the button and then have the automation go out there and delete the email from the user's inbox and then search the rest of the enterprise and see did other people receive this? And if so, delete it. So you prevent that, that entry point of attack. And like I said, that's all I've got. So I am open to questions. This is something I'm a huge fan of. So please feel free to hit me with whatever questions you've got.
Looks like Leonard West raised their hand. If you want to put your Q&A or your question or comment in the Q&A, we can then address it. All right. Well, Josh, did you have anything else? Oh, here it is. Josh, it looks like it's in the, there's 2 questions that just came through if you want to address those.
Yep, I see those. So AI ops, that's a good question. It's been asked before, but I honestly can't remember for the life of me, just because my ADHD brain is pushing me in 100 different ways, so I don't remember for sure. So it doesn't look like that's here yet. I know that's being worked on. I don't have an ETA I can give you, but that is something that is coming. And then Leonard, it looks like you wanted to know about learning. So there is a community edition of this available. Now, no, you're going to see we have XSOAR 8 available. That's currently only available as a SaaS offering, but there is an on-prem version coming as well. So you're going to still be working in the version that I showed you. This is version 6. But you can get a trial edition of this that allows you to run free for 30 days, and then you're just limited on the number of automations that you can run per day, essentially. And then likewise, there's a good video series one of our customer success team members produced. And let me hope it doesn't autoplay here. Yeah, this playlist is absolutely fantastic. This walks you through all the major components of the platform. So starting out with the foundations of building a playbook, getting into advanced concepts like transforming data or filtering data, looping through different multiple IP addresses and performing the same action, pre-processing rules, post-processing rules, and so on. But if you want, Katie, I don't know, I can send a link to you, Katie, and then if you're going to send, you can send that out as a follow-up.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay, so yeah, I can include both links for the community edition as well as the video series. Highly recommend them both. And then if you want the video series, I definitely reach out to me and I can get you a copy of the content pack that's available. It's not currently published to our marketplace, although it's in process. But there's a content pack that goes along with this that includes a simulator for Active Directory events. So let's say if I go in here and I go back to, there's this here, let me turn off dark mode. Sorry, I know that's hard to see. And while I'm waiting on this to load, what this essentially does is it generates fake incidents that are based off certain pieces of Active Directory data that you're going to go through in the video series and actually develop a working use case for. You're going to do things like defanging a URL, making it so you can't click on it. So you get rid of the periods in between the different components of the URL and turn those into, bracket. Or, checking to see, is the user a member of an engineering group or a sysadmin group or an executive group? If so, you want to change the priority of an incident to critical, and then take additional action. So that's what this engineer training integration is. It's literally just an event generator. So if you do want to go down that road, I'll provide my email address as well. So you're free to reach out to me. And I can get you a link to a copy of that content that you can load. Is there anything else? Any other questions? No?
Okay, Josh, it looks like one just, thank you.
No, you're welcome, Jeff. Like I said, this is definitely something I am very passionate about. So I really, really enjoy it. And I'm always happy to start talking automation and orchestration. I love to be able to nerd out. So
it looks like someone was asking if you could give them their email. I don't know if you want to do that on the side or we can.
Yeah, I'll do that on the side.
Okay. Jim, if you just want to email the fuel user group contact through the website, we can work with you on getting you that email.
All right. And that's all I have then.
All right, great. Well, Josh, thank you so much. That was a really engaging presentation with all those demos.